In this video, we will be covering how to configure your event request forms. So those are located under Events and then Event Request Forms. You might have a few configured here that just come with the application. You can either use those that are already existing and customize them, or you can add a new template. I'm going to give the form a name. This is my classroom request form. Number of lead days, so maybe you don't want them to put in a request for today, so they need at least a day's notice, and then maybe they can go out a year in advance, or maybe it's just 6 months, especially being a classroom request form. You also can use the dates allowed for the meeting requests. If you only want them to be creating events during a certain date range, you can do that by selecting a start date and an end date. And that means that if anyone tries to select a date outside of that date range, they will not be able to put in the request. The display text is to put kind of what the request form is used for. Form is used to request the use of classroom spaces. That way they don't fill out the entire form and then realize that they can't select the rooms that they're looking for. You can put images, you can put your logo, all kinds of different things up here at the top of the form. And click OK. This is our confirmation text. So this would typically say something like, thanks for your request. Allow maybe 24 hours for approval. Contact so-and-so at the email address, something to that effect. And that's what they'll see when they hit submit at the end. Using customer filtering, if you have this selected, it will allow them to select from your customer and contact list, or if they are already in there associated with that, it will automatically populate. You can also filter down by customers, so if you only want to allow them to select from certain customers, you can filter that down. The event type filter is also a way to filter down the different event types. You can limit that so that it doesn't allow them to pick from all of them. Same with meeting type. On the room filter settings and resource filter settings, it's going to be determining what you want to allow customization to the filters that you actually set up here under Save Filters. So I'm going to go to the Save Filters first. This is how you can pare this down to classroom spaces. If you're only going to have one filter, I would make that the default. Expand my filter. You're only going to want to show the available rooms, so that way they can't even see if something's unavailable. And then you can select, the campus maybe that you're looking for. And then I select a room type of classroom. So this would be the only rooms they can request would be classroom spaces. And then from there, do you want it to show all the rooms? Do you want it to show only the saved filters so that they can't see anything but classroom spaces? Show only the default filter. If you've set up more than one filter, then it's only going to show the default. Show the selected room filter, where you can actually pick only the filters that they can use to filter down the list. So some of these you might take out, that way it's not giving them too many options. Same with resource filters. Once we've set up the shell of our event request form, we're going to save. Go to the edit form in the top right hand corner. There are some default items that we do have to have on the form, so you cannot remove these. That is the title of the request form, the overall event name, contact name, and contact email. So these are all required, but you can put them on the form wherever you would like. Question bank are items that are actually attached to the overall event. If you add any of these fields, they will pull into the event into Astra. Otherwise, you can add additional fields that are more custom to specific questions that you have for your requester. Some of the most common that we might see would be like contact phone number. You just click and drag these over here to add them in. Maybe event type, so that way they can select it. This is one field that is required. Approver doesn't have to select it. And then add a meeting. is where they're actually able to create their meeting and potentially select rooms and resources. Inside the add a meeting, there is a required option, which means they have to create a meeting. I would say if you're going to add the meeting on here, you probably want it required. And then you would go into the settings icon to determine what settings you want to allow within this meeting configuration. If you want to allow them to select a room, you would select request rooms. And then if you want to make it required that they have to pick a room, so that way they can submit a request with just the meeting, they have to also select a room. Whether or not you want to allow them to request resources, so these are your equipment and services. Meeting description, if you're using the overall event description, maybe you don't need the meeting description. Event meeting type is not required, the event type is. So if you don't want to use event meeting type, you can remove it or you can add it and make it required. Max attendance, so how many people do you want to have attend? And then these last checkboxes that aren't typically used on a request, but maybe used more for the overall event approver. The featured checkbox allows the event to potentially be highlighted on a calendar or maybe used in marketing. The private checkbox means that only people that have access to private events can see it. So you probably don't want your requester determining that. Required room checkbox is when you want to potentially uncheck it and say that I don't need a room, maybe I only need a resource. That would probably be on its own form. So most of those aren't going to be used within your typical request form. So then you click done. And each of these, as you click on them, you can determine whether or not you want them required, and you can also change the name of them. This is the display name, and if you don't want it to be called event type, you could change that to something else. I've had people change like contact name to say your name and maybe your email address. It's still mapped to the actual field of email. So whatever you would like these to be, you can, update them. As far as the available fields go, you've got a checkbox, so they can just, check the box yes or no, they don't need it. Custom display content is literally a custom field that you can do lots of things with. Drop down is going to be, something that they can select within that drop down. It's a little different than multiple choice though. Multiple choice actually will have each item listed and they put checkboxes by what they want. A header is kind of like the overall header of the event request form. You can also create headers, so you could have like contact information and then all the fields here. Those headers allow you to kind of break up the fields. You have long answer and then short answer, so just depending on if you want to have one field or you want to have a box for more of a paragraph. So as you add these over here again, just click and drag to where it is that you want them on the form. On any of the custom display content fields, you do not have to have kind of a header for that. So if you're just putting a link or you want to type in text and so forth, you can do that. You can choose different colors, fonts, bold, italics, and so forth. You have to click the little edit pencil down here to start typing. So this could be policy information, maybe your terms and conditions, and then you could have another field that's where they have to select yes or no that they've read the policy information. Once you've populated all the fields that you need, you can save and close your request form. I'm going to show you some of the other request forms so you can see an example. So here we've got a logo added in, some procedures, guidelines, any information that you want to add into there. Here's an example where they can select yes or no. Text boxes, kind of food and beverage disclaimer. So these are custom fields that are put in here. And then on your add a meeting, if you have lead time where they can't select today, then if they were able to select that, you'll get a message that says doesn't meet the required lead time, so it'll make them change their meeting. And then if you've allowed them to assign rooms or assign resources, then we'll have that option available. And this is where it's been filtered down to the specific spaces that you allow them to request on this form. Some more terms and conditions. I've read and understand this, yes, and then we would submit our request. Once they submit, then this is the confirmation text that you have. So again, you can put logo, different text, contact information, things like that. The forms can be very simple or more complex, just depending on how much information you need to know in order to approve that event. Here's one more example of a request form where I've got an image here at the top, some fields, not a lot of fields, just a few options here. You know, same concept. This one just has add a meeting and assign a room. We'll add a meeting. This one does have number of lead days, so we have to have 3 days lead time here, so it will not allow them to select a time that is too quick. When we go to assign rooms here, there's only a couple of rooms defined here that they have access to select, and in this one we're not allowing any filtering, so it's just select what one you want and click OK. So that is how to create your event request templates and use the event request form.